So, Seconds Out, delighted to be joined by Alex Deacon, creator of Boxing Manager, which launched earlier this week on all Apple devices. Just, I suppose, first of all, tell us what sparked the concept behind the predecessor to Boxing Manager, which was world title Boxing Manager, of course.
Sure. I mean, it's a game that's been a long time coming. I worked on the Championship Manager 2 and 3 games and was a massive fan of those games and thought when playing those, it would be amazing to make a boxing version of them. So it started then, ended up, like I say, working for the people who made Championship Manager 2 and 3, or as they were making 2 and 3. Then I used to sell a few, did historic boxing simulators as well. So, the kind of what if type games, and was selling a few of those in the early days of the internet, then had to go and get a normal job. Wished I'd chosen probably another sport that was, at that time, mid 90s, that would not wished I'd chosen another sport. But, if you're making a game, you want to sell it. Not many people are interested in our beloved sport. So it seemed an odd choice. But anyway, went on to do it, always continued making it, made various other versions, never sold it. Came to around about 3 or 4 years ago when I thought, well, actually, let's just do it. Left work, left everything, and just got behind it, got a small team together to help design and develop it with me. And we went from there. And it's been ongoing ever since. I think the success of World Title Boxing Manager took us not quite by surprise, but we were glad that people engage with the game as much as they have.
There's a lot of people out there will be familiar, of course, with Championship Manager franchise. How similar is Boxing Manager to those games?
I mean, it's obviously it's a boxing version. Boxing's a different sport, and I think boxing is hard to simulate in some ways. So it's very easy to do with football. You've got teams, you've got a season, everything's very laid out. Obviously, in boxing, nothing's laid out, which is why we love it. And yet, also to try and make a game and a structure out of a thing that has no structure, or not really, is an interesting thing. So where I kind of sit, if I was playing Championship Manager 2 or 3 at the minute, I think I'd try to make the game about back to that level. I mean, obviously, those guys have got 30 years of development. We've got a little bit of time. So where do we join them in that? Around that level. So you should be playing, or I'd like to think when I'm playing it, it's the same kind of experience as playing one of those earlier Championship Manager games, the really compelling ones, not with all the kind of fancy graphics and stuff, but just very much concentrated on the sport. So that's how I describe the game, really.
Talk us through it. So from someone who's just started playing for the first time, you're a manager or a trainer, where do you go from there? Do you begin to build your stable? How does it work?
Yeah, so what the game works, it imagines you are you, albeit with a few quid behind you, unlike most of us. You start off, you choose a stable, or you choose a country and you can choose any country in the world from, the United States down to American Samoa. There's every single part of the game is simulated. Albeit with unique fighters. There are no real fighters in there at the minute, for reasons you can imagine. Of course. So every single game as it's made is brand new. So you start the game as a brand new manager with a gym in a country of your choice. You get a reasonable selection of 4 guys at the start. So you look at all of basically everybody, every rookie that's out there in the country, make a pick of those. And from there, you matchmake, you develop you train them, you use experience as they kind of develop in line with their potential to grow their abilities. And you just matchmake your way through the divisions as you would normally. Again, trying not to rush a boxer too much in it. I think one of the things we're in is, are we trying to make a kind of golden age of boxing game where, keeping the O is less important? Or are we trying to make a modern game? So we're sort of balancing that at the moment. And the game just sees you doing that, opening new gyms, enhancing, upgrading gyms, signing new fighters, traveling, really, for me, wanting to travel with each boxer from their first fight to their last fight, if you can manage it, whatever that may be and however that pans out. I think that's, for me, the experience I want.
What are the various improvements that have been made from World Title Manager to its successor?
Sure. I mean, we've tried to improve every element of the game. So we're very 100% led by customer feedback. So we've always been gone out of our way to solicit what players want. And most of the time, I mean, we're players as well. So it chimes normally with what we want. So we just prioritize that way. So for this, it was increasing the number of world titles. In the first game, there was just 1 and 8 weights, albeit with 3,000 fighters. So big depth to each division. In this, we put in 3 configurable weight title orgs that you can that have their own rule sets, albeit hidden away and very opaque at the moment.
Okay.
5 regional sets of rankings, a whole new training mechanism, new fight screens, new fight instructions, massively enhanced our cuts and injuries stuff that's going on in the game, a whole new UI as well. Countless, I mean, an end-to-end kind of rewrite of the game, really.
Excellent. And it's only available on iOS as it stands. Is there any plans to expand into Android and so forth?
Again, we're led by what customers want there. So we came out on iOS simply because I wanted to, I wanted to have these boxes in my pocket on the phone that I've got. So that, I mean, it's as random as that. We've asked customers, and I think if we were to do one next, it would be PC. I know most people go from PC down to phone. We may go the other way. For Android, again, it will just be on demand. So you're one vote in that direction.
Now, I don't want you to kind of advertise any competitors, but is there much else out there?
There are a few games out there. I think what's interesting is, I mean, we would sort of position ourselves as, the biggest ever boxing manager game for iPhone, which, I mean, there's not many competitors out there, but there are a few. But I think what's interesting looking at it from boxing, given that, say, football manager is very much European and UK centric, our market is a lot more split. So we're 50% UK, 50% US sales. So in the US, there's a lot more of a kind of history of sports gaming and sports general manager games. So whether it's baseball games, American football type things. So, there are games out there who are competitors. And in those sports manager games in America, there have been really good boxing games. There have been some brilliant boxing manager games. Alas, I don't think there are any that are trying to do what we are doing at the moment.
Now, obviously, we're only 4 days into the rollout, but what sort of feedback have you had so far? As you said, you're looking at that on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, I spend my life looking at nothing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I mean, I think going back to World Title Boxing Manager, the thing that surprised us the most, I mean, your whole game on being on an Apple device depends on the level of ratings and level of type of reviews you get. And we were blown away. The number of reviews we got for World Title Boxing Manager, particularly as a paid game, when it's not, it's not a free game, just blew us away. So as we look to moving over to Boxing Manager, we see exactly the same thing. We've got very high ratings, albeit a lot less. We've got thousands for the other game, but everything seems to be mapping across nicely for us in that way.
How much is the game, and are there various in-app purchases as well?
So the game is intended not to have in-app purchases. I don't want anybody thinking they have to pay extra to do well in it. You buy the game, like a normal game. You buy the game and that's your lot. So it's £4.99 on the App Store, $4.99 in America. And there are 3 in-app purchases which people wanted, which are simply just some cheap cash boosts of 1 million, 5 and 10 million cash boost, but nothing you need to play the game.
So what's the future then? Obviously, this has launched. You hope it goes even better than World Title Boxing Manager did. You've talked about maybe a desktop version. Are you going to expand into different games as well?
No, I mean, we love boxing, and this is the game we want to play. I mean, we've looked at other things, but we just sit there and just think, why aren't we just spending our time doing our game? The game we love. So I don't think we'll be making other games. I think we'll put our energy into just making the game as realistic. At the minute, it's a good, fun, playable, kind of ersatz version of boxing. I want to be able to open it up and it to be the same as boxing. I want to have real fighters, which we can do, and we'll get there sooner rather than later, I think. And I'd like to be able to watch the fights. I like being able to read them. I grew up listening to boxing on the radio, midweek boxing, which was just, you know, fantastic way for a sport to become alive. And so I think we get that within the game, but I'd also, and I think customers as well, would like to be able to watch some kind of simulation. Why not? That would be cool, right?
Did you do much kind of consulting with people within the boxing industry? Because as you said, one of the aims is to make it as realistic a game as possible.
Yeah, I mean, when we started it, we got really lucky. I sent out 5 letters to Frank, I mean, this goes back in time. So Frank Maloney, Frank Warren, who else was out there at the time? Cedric Kushner, King, and who else? There was one other as well. All of them, no one responded to me. Anyway, one guy picked the letter out of a dustbin in Frank Maloney's office and said, would you come and help me do some stuff? So this was at the time of Panic's promotions. And through that connection, a guy called Dale Stewart, kind of American boxing person, who's in the middle of everything, but you never hear of them type guy, ended up working with Manny Steward when he came over for, it was the Hearns-Nate Miller fight. Right, the end of the last century, you know. It was Ricky Hatton's first headline. And so Manny came over for that, and he was the first person who got very involved in, well, look, this is wrong, you need to do this. And so I basically was locked in a hotel room in Manchester with Manny for 2 days, taking orange juice down to Thomas Hearns. Hill McKenty was there as well. Whole crazy, crazy thing. And so from there, I ended up in Vegas, hanging out with a lot of the Lennox Lewis people, then was involved, did a lot with, again, all through this same American guy, Dale Stewart. Ended up in some crazy boxing situations in the Dorchester with Tyson and Tyson's trainers, and, you know, selling tickets in Las Vegas for Holyfield Lewis 2 with Hedgeman Lewis out of the room. So that was, and that's the kind of side of it I like. You know, training is training. I love the business. I love the scene and the colour. That's a lot of colour.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, eye-watering.
Can you recall some of the kind of key points that Emanuel Steward passed on, or things that he felt weren't quite right at first?
I think it was the things he felt weren't right were easily resolved things. We just sat there, and I always had my laptop with me, so it's like, okay, well, let's just change them. So we just changed a few things around training emphasis. But it was just, I mean, to be in a room with a guy saying, you know, what do you want me to show you? And I would ask a question. He would then stand up and say, okay, well, you be X and I'll be Y. Yeah. And I'll show you how that doesn't work. Which is, I mean, 2 days that one never forgets. So that was then. Now, less so. Again, I'm still connected with my friend Dale, who I think, from what I understand, does a lot of work out with the Mayweather people and all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, he's around the scene. So that's my connection, but more over in Vegas. And I wish I could get there, to be honest with you.
And just before I let you go, what are the kind of elements of the game? Because you said you want to keep making it as good as it possibly can be. Where are the areas that you feel it could still improve?
Depth of the relationship with the fighter. I want, when you sign the fighter, at the minute, it's a very transactional relationship. So you sign a contract, you make fights for them. They're happy if they win. They're less happy if they lose. And there's some complexity in there around money and such like. But I want to flesh the fighter out more. So, you know, I mean, it's a strange business, and it's, you know, so there are things that we have to code for or consider and design in boxing that in Football Manager you just don't have to. So, I mean, I think, you know, there are some very extreme situations that are part of the sport, and having made those things, it's easy to say they're not fun to play, you know, so, but they do make you think about the sport. So I think something down that line where, you know, you open up the phone and you open up a really true simulation of the world of boxing. At the minute, I think it's really needed, more so than ever. So yeah, something that just fleshes out the fighters, makes everything deeper, the history deeper. There's got to be some multiplayer in there to do that, I think, to get unbelievable amounts of depth, being people able to bring fighters over to fight with one another. It kind of gets a bit complicated, but it's not we are where we are, and we've got a lot of time to do it.
Excellent. Now, if people want to find out more about the game, and how to play it, how to download it, etc., where can they go? What's the social media touch points and so on?
Sure. I mean, I think the easiest way to get the game is to go onto the App Store and just search Boxing Manager. You'll find it straight away. We've got a website at theboxingmanagergame.com. Again, easy to remember. A really good community. We've got tons of stuff for the game. We've got YouTube tutorials, a big game manual, if you like game manuals, as I do, that describe everything in intimate detail, and as well as a really great community and forum that is sort of burgeoning with some very hardcore players, I have to say. So, which is encouraging and also scary how good people are at the game.
Just one quick thing before we go. Have you heard of anyone within the boxing industry playing the game, and have there been any feedback from anyone?
Not that I know of. I know there's some stuff in America. I know that, again, I hear from my colleague over there that things get passed around over there. So I don't know, nothing in the UK that I'm aware of. And the stuff in America, well, I can't imagine.
Hopefully this interview changes that. I'd really like to see how some of the modern day managers and trainers get on with a simulation like this.
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing is the game, in boxing, not least after the Muhammad Ali Act in America, the separation of trainer, promoter, manager, etc., etc. The game, even though you have separate trainers in it, what we are trying to do is bring it all together as a single sort of imaginary person, I think. I mean, that person may have existed once, but they don't, it's sort of slightly synthetic, if you see what I mean.
Then that's more similar to the UK model, I suppose.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just think, yeah, if you've got someone like Dave Caldwell or someone like that who put himself as each one of those things, that's fair enough. So I think we're trying to make a game that's fun as well, and to not have those elements of control. I think each one in its own right is a pretty dull game. Boxing trainer, great. Boxing manager, in the actual parlance of being a manager, also a bit dull. The promoting bit, I don't know, unless you make some kind of thing where you live the life of Cedric Kushner, back in the day, then it's also quite boring. So, we're trying to make a fun game. And I think that's borne out. I mean, if you look at our player stats, I mean, the median time that each player will play our world title boxing manager, for example, is an hour. So that's, fantastic amount. And that's just across the
board. So far, the new one's about 3 hours, isn't it?
That was the number in the first week, which obviously is a lot less.
It's a limited data set, but yeah.
Sure, but it's still much higher. So once we find some people will look at it and just go, oh, it looks like a spreadsheet. They don't, it's like a book's all words, right? You need some pictures. Some people just are quite happy with the words. So we find that once it, if you know that kind of game, it's easy, or if you just want to try it, it's easy to get very, very sucked in. I mean, it's designed for that.
Brilliant. Well, it's been a pleasure to find out a bit more about it, and hopefully it goes from strength to strength.
Brilliant. Great. Thanks very much. Thanks for the call.
Great to meet you, and see you again soon, hopefully.
Thanks, Annie. Cheers.
Take care, Alex. Bye-bye.
Bye.